Welcome to today's episode of Kids Town Corner. Today we're going to go over a follow-up on our sedation video just to answer some of the questions or concerns that people have had as far as the safety of sedation and kind of maybe some of the tips that we can give you guys to just make sure that you have, number one, a safe experience with your child.
Yeah, like most things, you know, there's certain guidelines and parameters that if you stay within those guidelines and those parameters, something can be very safe. And if you go outside of those guidelines and parameters, something as simple as driving in a car can become very dangerous. If you're distracted, if you're drinking, if you're messing around with the radio, you know, those things can end up distracting you and causing an accident. So it's the same thing with sedations. You know, one of the first things that we want to do whenever we're talking about sedating a child is we just want to go over that child's health history with you. And again, just make sure that there aren't any underlying medical conditions that child has that could end up making it unsafe for us to sedate your child in the office. And so just being open and honest with the dentist and you know, making them aware of any underlying health conditions that your child might have.
Absolutely. And the day of sedation, we'll do another health assessment just to check oxygen levels, heart rate, listen to breathing. If your child's been congested or had a cough, you always want to let the dentist know, oh yeah, they have had a little bit of a cough. There's never too little of a cough to double check. So those are things that we double check before we get started. One of the really hard and fast guidelines for any type of sedation in any clinic, anywhere, is that the child come fasting. So they need to have nothing to eat or drink, typically from midnight the night before. The main reason there, and people are like, oh, that's so hard with, you know, my child's 3, how do I explain to them? And it is difficult. It's essentially, you have to think of it as any surgery. So like when you go in for surgery, you know, I've had multiple random surgeries that, you know, I've had to be fasting until like 7 o'clock at night sometimes, and that's no fun. And with a kid, it's even harder. But remembering why is the big thing. And so the reason why is because sedation or anesthesia in general tends to bring on nausea and vomiting. If your child is asleep and were to throw up, there's a high tendency, especially with them laying down, that vomit could go back down the wrong tube. So it can go into their lungs, and if that ends up in their lungs, you can get a very, you know, what's called aspiration pneumonia, which is no joke. That can land a kiddo in the hospital, and it can be deadly as well. And so when your dentist, so that answers the question of why nothing to eat or drink. And it also has to do with some of the safety of some of these sedations where you hear some of these terrible stories. Be honest with the dentist. Don't, if you know your child had something, it's way better to be honest and upfront. Yeah, he had, you know, a couple drinks of this, and the dentist can make an assessment and see if it's still within the safety range or not. So those are a couple of huge key points.
Right. Another issue that we'll run into, particularly with our conscious sedations, is, again, we talked about how for a conscious sedation, the child has to be cooperative, and they have to be cooperative to drink the medicine. So sometimes we'll have a child drinking the medicine, and sometimes they'll spit part of that medicine out. Well, we don't know how much your child drank and how much your child spit out. And so the temptation is, will my child spit part of it out? Can you give him a little bit more? The answer is no.
Right.
We can't give your child any more. Again, we don't know how much he drank. We don't know how much he spit out. And by giving more, then we run the risk of over sedating your child, giving your child too much medicine. The other temptation might be sometimes is your child might be right on the edge. We've given them their oral sedation medicine. We're back there, we're doing the work. They're doing okay, they're kind of struggling a little bit. Man, if we just gave them a little bit more, we feel like we could go ahead and get all the work done for you today, but the answer is no. We never give any more on top of what we've already given. If it's not enough, for us to be able to get the work done with the medicine that we've given. Then we've got to cancel the appointment and take the next step, which is the deep sedation.
Absolutely. One of the final things that we really pay close attention to with your child, whether they're being sedated or not actually, is the amount of local anesthetic that's being used to numb your child. And that amount is based on their weight. So if you have just a little, a small 4-year-old, let's say for their age, but they've got cavities in all 4 areas of their mouth, and let's say your 4-year-old is a slight 30 to 35 pounds, and we get some of those little petite princesses that are small. We don't have enough local anesthetic to numb them safely to do all the teeth in one visit. And so at that point, we need to look at forms of sedation like deep sedation or general anesthesia that don't require that amount to get your child adequately numb. With the constant sedation, with the oral sedation, they've got to be just as numb as if they're wide awake, because if that tooth is zinging them when we're cleaning it, they'll wake right up and they're not going to be happy. So we got to get them adequately numb. So that can be a pitfall that happens in dentistry, where they really want to get this work done and the dentist is feeling a ton of pressure to get it all done. Oh, I think we could probably get it done, but I've met my local anesthetic max for this child. We don't do that. We don't mess with anything going over those parameters, those guidelines and rules. So before a visit, before I sit down, before Dr. Wren sits down, and before any dentist should, before they sit down, think, okay, how much does this child weigh? How much anesthetic can they receive? And then you just stick with it. You stick to it, as hard as it may be. To not finish all the work, you have to stop, so you don't overdose them on local anesthetic. So those are essentially a lot of the safety tips. Anything else?
Yeah, one other thing I would just add is, properly monitoring your child during the appointment.
Absolutely.
A lot of times with a sedated patient, if there's a breathing issue, it could be something as simple as just the position of their head. If their head's tilted down a little bit too far while they're sedated, they're having a hard time, pushing oxygen because of the position of their head. If you're properly monitoring that child and you've got the pulse oximeter on there, you're going to pick up on that very quickly. A little adjustment of the head and their oxygen shoots right back up, and things are fine. So just know that here at Kidstown, we're going to properly monitor your child the whole time and make sure that the breathing and the heart rate and everything is spot on.
Absolutely. So that's a lot of the behind the scenes of safety and sedation. Making sure top priority is that your child is safe and has a great experience. So we hope you've learned something from today's episode of Kidstown Corner. If you liked what you heard, you think this might be helpful to your friends or family, please share. Any other comments or questions, please put them down below. We are happy to answer. Thank you.